It's late. You are lost in a forest you don't know. The trees stretch on for miles in every direction, and the light is fading. Then, somewhere in the distance, you hear it, a baby crying, alone, in the middle of nowhere, in Tlingit country. This is the moment your life is supposed to end. This is the story of the Kushtaka, the Land Otter Man. It is a warning passed down within Tlingit communities across generations, a warning about what can happen to you if you are lost, alone, or grieving in the Alaskan wilderness, because the Kushtaka does not hunt the strong. It waits for the vulnerable, and when it finds them, it does something worse than kill them. But before we go any further, we need to answer the question that outsiders always ask first. What is it exactly? And this is where Western language begins to fail. The Kushtaka is not a ghost. Ghosts, in the way most of us understand them, are the lingering spirits of people who once lived. The Kushtaka was never human. It has never been a person who died. It is something else entirely. It is not a cryptid either. It is not Bigfoot. It is not a hidden animal waiting somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness for a biologist to catalog it. It cannot be tracked. It cannot be trapped. It cannot be captured on film in the way people in the West have tried and failed to capture other creatures. And it is not a demon. Demons come from imported religions. The Kushtaka predates Christianity in Southeast Alaska by thousands of years. In Tlingit understanding, the Kushtaka is a supernatural being. It has a body, one that can walk through a forest, leave tracks in the mud, and lay hands on a person. But it also has spiritual power. It can steal souls. It can transform them. It can move between the human world and something older that sits alongside it. There is no clean word in English for a being that can leave physical tracks in the mud and reach into the space where your soul is supposed to sit. A creature with intelligence and intent that isn't an animal. A presence with spiritual power that isn't a ghost. The Tlingit have carried the word for it for over 1,000 years. Kushtaka. In the mid-1890s, a man named Franz Boas spent years working within Tlingit communities in Southeast Alaska. He was one of the founding figures of American anthropology. But more than that, he was an outsider, willing to sit down, shut up, and listen. He collected oral narratives directly from Tlingit informants in Sitka and the surrounding villages. His work was published in 1895 as Tlingit Myths and Texts, and within it, he documented something the Tlingit had known for generations. Boas wrote down the physical description of the Kushtaka, their association with water and drowning, their ability to mimic the human voice, and the cultural taboos required to avoid them, including notably a prohibition against saying the word otter while near the water. Nearly 130 years later, that record still stands. In its natural form, the Kushtaka is described as a large, upright creature, part man, part otter. It has webbed hands. It has a broad, whiskered face and dark, wet fur. Its eyes are said to be intensely intelligent and utterly wrong, but it rarely shows its true form. When it approaches humans, it takes shapes it knows the human will trust. Sometimes it appears as an otter, an innocent, curious animal you might see anywhere along the coast. Sometimes it appears as a person the victim knows, a friend, a relative, a spouse who died years ago. And sometimes it does not appear at all. It only speaks. Tlingit tradition, documented across more than a century of ethnographic work, holds that the Kushtaka can perfectly mimic the human voice. They can call your name from the trees. They can imitate the cry of a lost child. They can reproduce the sound of a woman weeping, of a man calling for help, of any voice you have ever known. They do this because they understand something fundamental about human beings. We are hardwired to respond to familiar voices, to comfort a crying infant, and to turn when someone calls our name. The Kushtaka knows this, and it uses it. Here is where the story becomes complicated, because within Tlingit tradition, there is not one belief about the Kushtaka. There are two, and they contradict each other in ways that make the entity even more disturbing than a simple monster would be. In this version, the Kushtaka is a soul thief. It targets people who are lost, drowning, or freezing to death, people whose spirits are already loosening from their bodies. It lures them deeper into the wilderness with familiar voices, guides them away from rescue, and eventually kills them. Their souls are then trapped inside the Kushtaka's world, forever, unable to move on to the afterlife their ancestors prepared for them. The second belief is stranger. In this version, the Kushtaka is not evil. It is a rescuer. When a person is about to die in the freezing Alaskan wilderness, from exposure, from drowning, from starvation, the Kushtaka arrives, and rather than let them die, it transforms them. It takes their dying body and remakes it. Fur grows over their skin, their hands become webbed, their features shift, and when the transformation is complete, they are no longer human. They are Kushtaka. They are saved, but they can never go home. Both traditions exist, both are taught, and both agree on one point. If you meet a Kushtaka, you do not come back the same person, or you do not come back at all. Traditional Tlingit protections against them are specific, and they have not changed in generations. Copper is said to ward them off, so are dogs. And there are certain words, including, as Boas documented in 1895, the word otter itself, that you do not speak when you are near the water. For most of history, these are the stories told by firelight, warnings, traditions, legends carried forward for 1,000 years. But in the year 1900, 4 American prospectors sent one of their own into the wilderness looking for gold. Only he ever saw what waited there, and only one of them ever wrote it down. The most widely referenced non-indigenous account of a Kushtaka encounter comes from a slim, 46-page book called The Strangest Story Ever Told. It was published in 1953, 3 years after the author's death. The man who wrote it was Harry D. Kolb. He had written the manuscript in 1925, put it in a box, and forgotten about it. After his death, his wife found the manuscript. His daughter Virginia later had it published. But here is the thing. Harry Kolb did not see the Kushtaka. His friend did. In the spring of 1900, 4 prospectors were sharing a shack in Wrangell, Alaska. Kolb identifies his 3 partners only by first name, John, Charlie, and Fred. He deliberately withheld their surnames. The 4 men were broke. One night in April, Charlie came into the shack in a state of excitement. For the past month, he had been on the trail of an old Tlingit man, trying to get him to reveal where he had found a piece of free gold quartz. And that night, the old man had finally told him what he wanted to know. There was a place inland from Thomas Bay, a stretch of coastline the Tlingit knew as the Bay of Death, where a rich vein of gold-bearing quartz was said to exist. The instructions were specific: paddle up the coast, camp along the Patterson River, travel upriver about 8 miles, then turn toward the high mountains for another 1.5 miles. There, you would find a lake shaped like a half moon, and in that lake, gold. They had one problem. They didn't have enough money for 4 men to outfit an expedition, so they made a decision. Only one of them would go. The other 3 would stay behind in Wrangell, take odd jobs, and wait. Charlie was chosen. In the forepart of May, Charlie loaded 3 months of supplies into a canoe and paddled roughly 50 miles northwest, up the coast to Thomas Bay. John and Fred took a contract to cut wood. Kolb took a job at the Wrangell sawmill, and then they waited. Charlie followed the old Tlingit man's directions exactly. He paddled to Thomas Bay, he camped along the Patterson River, he hiked upriver about 8 miles, then turned inland toward the high mountains for another 1.5 miles. And there, at the foot of the mountains, he found it, the Half Moon Lake, and that is where they came for him. Kolb records Charlie's account in his own words.
Swarming up the ridge toward me from the lake were the most hideous creatures. I could not call them anything but devils. They were neither men nor monkeys, yet looked like both. Their bodies were covered with long, coarse hair, except where the scabs and running sores had replaced it. Each one seemed to be reaching out for me and striving to be the first to get me. The air was full of their cries, and the stench from their sores and bodies made me faint.
Charlie ran. The creatures pursued him. He made it to his canoe. The next thing he remembered was coming to at night, lying in the bottom of his canoe, drifting between Thomas Bay and Sukhoi Island, alone, disoriented, and holding a single chunk of gold-veined quartz that he had pried loose before everything went wrong. Charlie arrived back in Wrangell in the first part of June, weeks earlier than expected. He walked into the shack without a coat, without a hat, looking, in Kolb's own words, as if he had been through hell. He did not greet his partners. He did not explain anything. He simply crossed the room and heaved the piece of quartz into a corner, and then he sat down. For a long time, he would not speak. When they finally got the story out of him, they did not believe it. Culp writes that they put his account down as a fantasy caused by loneliness and morbid thought. But Charlie was not staying to argue. He begged his partners to stake him to a steamship ticket to Seattle. He left on the first boat out the next morning, and he was never heard from again. That should have been the end of it. Charlie was gone. His piece of gold quartz was still lying in the corner of that Wrangell shack, and the story he had brought back with him was so unbelievable that the three men who heard it directly from his mouth did not think it was real. But Harry Culp did not forget it. He carried the story for 25 years. In 1925, he sat down and wrote it out, every detail Charlie had given him that day in Wrangell. He never published it. He put the manuscript in a box and set it aside, and it stayed there for the rest of his life. Culp eventually settled in Petersburg, Alaska, where he continued to prospect for gold and work various jobs until his death in 1950. After his death, his wife discovered the manuscript. Virginia, Culp's daughter, later had it published. The first edition was printed by Exposition Press in New York in 1953, 46 pages. A small, quiet book that arrived in the world without fanfare, and slowly, over the decades that followed, became inseparable from the modern understanding of the Kushtaka. There are researchers who argue that the strangest story ever told is embellished, that Culp shaped what Charlie told him into something more literary than what actually happened. That may be true, but the fact that Culp himself never sought to publish the story in his lifetime, that he wrote it down 25 years after hearing it and then put it away in a box, that he never turned it into a career or a public claim, that is not the behavior of a man seeking fame or profit. He simply wrote it down. He put it away, and he moved on with his life. What is not in dispute is that 4 prospectors shared a shack in Wrangell, Alaska in the spring of 1900, that one of them went to Thomas Bay alone, that he came back weeks early, silent, shaken, carrying a chunk of gold-veined quartz and a story his partners refused to believe, that he left Alaska the very next morning, and that he was never seen again. Charlie went in, Charlie came out, and whatever he saw at that half-moon lake beneath the mountains of Thomas Bay, whatever came swarming up that ridge toward him, followed him out of the wilderness, onto a steamship bound for Seattle, and into the rest of a life that no one ever heard about again. The Tlingit have warned about the Kushtaka for 10,000 years, and they still warn about it today. Harry D. Culp never saw it, but his friend Charlie did, and Charlie left Alaska the very next morning and was never seen again. Whether it is a soul thief, a rescuer, or something the modern world does not have a word for, everyone who has ever come close to it agrees on one thing. You do not come back the same person, or you do not come back at all. If you'd like to see more stories like this one, consider subscribing. It helps this small channel grow. Thank you for watching Nocturne Reports.